My name is Nora Evans. I'm 29, and I always thought I knew myself, what I liked, what I stood for, the life I was building. Yet that morning, as I dressed in my favorite emerald blouse paired with a pleated skirt that swished just so around my knees, a quiet storm started brewing. Matthew, my fiancé, Matthew White, leaned against the kitchen doorway, sipping his coffee, his gaze like a measuring stick. "Are you seriously wearing that?" he asked, his voice edged with incredulity. I froze. I'd worn this outfit countless times before. My friends complimented it. My mother adored the color. "What's wrong with it?" I asked cautiously, trying not to sound defensive. "It's dated," he said slowly, shaking his head. "It looks like something my grandmother would wear. You can't walk into an event like that and expect people not to judge." His words landed like shards of ice. My stomach tightened, and for a moment I couldn't even speak. I had always known Matthew was particular about appearances, but dated? Judged? Those words cut deeper than I expected. I stared at him, hoping he'd realize how unfair he was being, hoping he'd soften, but his expression remained firm, almost smug. "You have to present yourself properly, Nora. You're engaged now. People will see you, and you have to be suitable." I felt a flush rise to my cheeks, a mix of embarrassment, anger, and hurt swirling inside me. It was as though he had taken a scalpel to my confidence, dissecting my choices in front of the mirror and the empty kitchen. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that style was personal, that fashion was subjective, that my choices didn't need validation from him, but instead I stayed quiet, letting the words replay in my head, a slow drumbeat echoing, outdated, judged, unsuitable. As I applied my lipstick, carefully choosing a shade that matched the ensemble, my reflection in the mirror seemed foreign. Was this really how I appeared to the world? To Matthew? Doubt seeped in like water through cracks. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps I was making a mistake, showing the wrong version of myself. I remembered last weekend at his parents' brunch. I had chosen a teal scarf with subtle embroidery. He had whispered, loud enough for me to hear, "You really need to rethink your wardrobe. People notice these things." Back then, I had laughed it off. Now it felt like a warning, a foreshadowing of the scrutiny to come. My phone buzzed. Text from my best friend, Lena. "You look amazing. Don't let him tell you otherwise." I smiled faintly, grateful for the reminder, but the knot in my chest didn't loosen. Matthew, meanwhile, had moved closer, peering at me over his mug. "Seriously, Nora, if you go to that event like this, you're going to look pathetic." The word hit me like the slap. Pathetic. My inner monologue shattered into fragments. Am I really that bad? Am I really pathetic? I looked at the outfit again. It felt like armor suddenly turned fragile. The pleats swished gently, the blouse caught the morning light, but I couldn't see it anymore, only his judgment. I tried to steady my voice. "I like this outfit." He raised an eyebrow. "You like it? That's not enough. You have to look right. You're not a kid anymore, Nora. You're getting married. People expect standards." And there it was, the invisible line he had drawn. My personal taste versus his expectations. My autonomy versus his measure of acceptability. And the worst part? A tiny nagging part of me wondered if he might be right. I left the kitchen silently, tugging at the hem of my skirt. Every step toward the bedroom felt like walking a tightrope over a pit of judgment. My reflection in the hallway mirror caught my eye, and for a brief, dizzying moment, I questioned everything about myself. But somewhere in that self-doubt, a spark flickered. I remembered all the times I had dressed this way, painted my nails this color, chosen pieces that expressed me rather than anyone else. I remembered the quiet pride I felt in expressing my own style. And I realized, if I surrendered to his criticism now, it wouldn't just be about the outfit. It would be about surrendering my voice, my identity, the essence of who I am. I exhaled slowly, letting the tightness in my chest ease. Maybe he wouldn't approve. Maybe he would always judge. But for the first time that morning, I decided I wouldn't change for him. Not today, not for anyone. I caught my reflection again, and this time I saw Nora, the Nora who had chosen this blouse, this skirt, this morning. Flawed, strong, nervous, and resolute. She deserved respect, not constant critique. As I walked toward the door, my phone buzzed again. A text from Lena reminding me, "Own it. You look incredible." I smiled, a fragile but growing sense of empowerment warming my chest. The storm wasn't over. Matthew's words still lingered, and I knew this was only the beginning. But in that quiet kitchen, with sunlight spilling across my favorite outfit, I made a choice. I would not let anyone, least of all my fiancé, define my worth. The tension between us had been planted, subtle but undeniable. And deep down, I knew this would not be the last time our beliefs about appearance, control, and identity would collide. I closed the door behind me, leaving the kitchen and a part of my old self behind. The reflection staring back at me was mine alone, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like I was starting to fight back. The weekend arrived with a sense of looming dread I couldn't shake. Matthew had insisted we attend a pre-engagement gathering at his parents' house, a casual brunch, he said, but I knew better. Whenever there were other people around, his critiques turned sharper, his judgment louder, and I was the target. I spent the morning pacing, debating whether to change my outfit multiple times. My favorite emerald blouse called to me, but doubt crept in. Will they think I look ridiculous? Am I really that out of style? By the time we arrived, the house was buzzing with laughter, clinking glasses, and polite conversation. I smiled, trying to match the energy, but Matthew's eyes followed me like a hawk. The moment I stepped into the living room, he whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "That color makes you look washed out. Really, Nora, you could have done better." I stiffened, forcing a polite nod. He's not wrong, I thought briefly, and then immediately scolded myself. No. I had chosen this blouse because it felt like me. It suited me. His opinion didn't define that. But as the afternoon wore on, the critiques mounted. At the buffet, he muttered, "Do you really need those patterns? They're so busy. People will notice. They'll judge." He wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't private. It was public. And the whispers of other guests seemed to magnify his words. I felt every eye on me, imagined them silently weighing me, dissecting my choices. My fingers clutched my handbag, knuckles white. Everyone can see it. Everyone agrees with him. I'm a joke. I tried to smile, tried to laugh along with conversations, but inside I was unraveling. The woman who had confidently chosen her own style, who had embraced her individuality, was shrinking under the weight of constant judgment. And yet, amid the humiliation, a small voice within me refused to be silenced. "This isn't just about clothes," it whispered. "It's about control, about who gets to decide what's acceptable in your life." That realization hit harder than any insult. The humiliation stung, but recognition, clarity, ignited something stronger. I could feel the first threads of defiance weaving through my fear. Matthew, sensing my hesitation, pressed further. "Honestly, Nora, if you want people to respect you, you need to take this seriously. This isn't just style, it's perception. You're engaged now. You have a responsibility." I took a slow breath, steadying myself. My reflection in a nearby mirror caught my eye, and I saw the nervous lines around my mouth, the tension in my shoulders. But I also saw my own eyes, the green, defiant spark I had always ignored in myself. "You know what?" I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "I'm wearing this because I like it, and I'm not changing it to please anyone." A hush fell over the small crowd. My friends whispered, clearly impressed. A few relatives raised their eyebrows, uncertain how to react. And Matthew lips pressed into a tight line, his eyes narrowing. "Nora," he said, his voice lower now, controlled but tense. "This isn't about liking it. It's about how people see you. You can't just disregard that." I shook my head, letting my words land with quiet authority. I'm done letting someone else decide who I am. My choices are mine. If people judge me, that's on them, not me. The room was silent for a beat longer than comfortable. I caught the briefest look of shock on Matthew's face before he turned away, muttering something under his breath. I realized then that this was bigger than a blouse or a brunch. Every critique he had ever made, every subtle dig under the guise of advice, was about control. And today I had taken a small step toward reclaiming my voice. Later, alone in the car, I let the tension in my shoulders finally release. My reflection in the rearview mirror was clearer now, not perfect, not flawless, but unmistakably me. I didn't know what this meant for us, Matthew and me, but I knew one thing. If I continued bending, I would lose not just my style, but my sense of self. And no engagement, no relationship, no family expectation was worth that price. A small part of me still worried about the fallout. People had already whispered, "Do you think she'll ever change?" But another larger part, the part I was finally starting to listen to, felt a quiet surge of pride. I was beginning to understand that standing up to him wasn't just defiance. It was survival. It was the first step toward claiming my autonomy. And as we drove home in silence, I resolved, the next time he tried to belittle me, I would be ready. I didn't have all the answers yet. I didn't know if Matthew could respect my boundaries, or if our engagement could survive this growing tension. But I knew that no one, not him, not anyone, would ever dictate my worth again. The storm was gathering, and I could feel it humming just beneath the surface, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid of it. I was ready to face it. That evening, the apartment was quiet, yet every corner seemed heavy with tension. Matthew was perched on the edge of the sofa, scrolling on his phone, while I sat across from him, fingers tightly entwined, heart hammering in my chest. I had spent the entire drive home rehearsing what I wanted to say, every word carefully measured, yet my resolve felt brittle under the weight of months of subtle criticism. Finally, I exhaled and broke the silence. Matthew, we need to talk. He didn't look up. About the outfit earlier, his voice carried the same condescension that had haunted me all weekend. No, I said, leaning forward, eyes locked on his. It's not about the outfit, it's about everything that comes with it. Your constant need to control what I wear, how I present myself. It's about control, not advice, not concern, control. He finally looked at me, eyebrows furrowed. Control. Nora, I'm just trying to help you look appropriate. You know I only want what's best for you. Best for you, I said sharply, my chest tightening. You've been telling me what's acceptable, what's stylish, how I should behave, who I should be, all under the guise of wanting what's best. But it's not for me. It's for you, and I can't keep living like this. He shook his head, voice dropping. Nora, you're overreacting. Everyone wants you to look your best, to be presentable. I'm just being honest. I felt my anger rise, but it was tempered by clarity, the kind that comes from finally recognizing the patterns of manipulation. Honest? I echoed, leaning closer. Is it honest to tell me I'm pathetic, outdated, or ridiculous every time I make a choice that doesn't fit your ideal? Or is it control dressed up as honesty? The apartment seemed to shrink around us. His jaw tightened. You think I'm trying to control you? Nora, I'm your fiancé. I want us to look right together, to be seen the right way. Don't you want that too? I swallowed, letting his words roll over me. The sting of past criticisms, the whispered comments, the side remarks, the judgment disguised as guidance, rose again. But this time, I didn't flinch. I felt something else, resolve. No, I said, finally, clearly. I want to be me. I want to feel comfortable in my own skin. I want my choices to be mine, not dictated by fear of judgment, from you or anyone else. I can't keep bending, Matthew. I won't. His eyes narrowed, searching mine for weakness, but I held my gaze. If you can't accept that, then maybe we need to reconsider what engagement means. Maybe we need to ask ourselves if this is truly a partnership. The words hung in the air like a challenge. For the first time, Matthew looked uncertain, caught between his need for control and the undeniable truth of my conviction. I don't want a relationship where my value is measured by how well I conform to someone else's standards, I continued, my voice steady now. I don't want a marriage where I'm silenced, criticized, or reshaped to fit someone else's idea of me. I deserve respect for my choices, my style, my identity. There was a long silence. I could hear his breathing, heavy and tense. Then he muttered, "You're being dramatic." Maybe, I said softly, almost a whisper. Or maybe I'm finally being honest. I've spent too long pretending that his approval mattered more than mine. That stops now. I could feel the shift in the room, a tension that wasn't anger but something sharper, an acknowledgement that this was no longer a battle he could win with criticism alone. I didn't know what would come next, whether our engagement could survive this confrontation, but I knew something else. For the first time, I wasn't shrinking. I wasn't shrinking for his approval. As I left the apartment to clear my head, stepping out into the cool night air, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The storm wasn't over. Matthew would react. The following days might be turbulent, filled with arguments, manipulations, and tests of my resolve. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was steering my own life. I walked under the streetlights, letting the shadows stretch long and reassuring across the pavement. Every step reminded me of something I had almost forgotten, that my choices mattered, that my identity was mine alone, and that standing up for myself wasn't rebellion. It was survival. And somewhere deep down, I knew the coming days would force me to make even harder decisions, decisions that could reshape my relationship, my engagement, and my sense of self forever. For the first time, though, I wasn't afraid to face them. I was ready to fight for who I was. The day of the formal engagement dinner arrived, and I felt the tension pulsing in the air like electricity. Months of subtle judgments, whispered critiques, and internal battles had built to this moment. Matthew, dressed immaculately as always, barely glanced at me as we entered the venue. The glittering chandeliers and polished silverware were supposed to impress, but I barely noticed. My focus was inward, on the quiet, resolute fire that had been growing inside me. I had chosen my outfit carefully that morning, not to please him, not to provoke him, but because it reflected me. A deep sapphire dress, tailored but flowing, paired with simple earrings that caught the light without screaming for attention. I felt strong, I felt grounded, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't bracing myself for his critique. Almost immediately, Matthew leaned close, whispering, "Nora, maybe you should have—" "Stop!" I interrupted, my voice calm but firm, cutting through the low murmur of the dining room. Heads turned subtly, sensing the tension. Matthew froze, a flash of irritation crossing his face. "I'm done changing for anyone. I'm done letting someone else define my worth, my style, or my choices. I'm not dated, I'm not embarrassing, and I will not shrink to fit someone else's idea of me," I said, letting the words sink in. My heart raced, but my voice held steady. Around us, the room grew quiet. Some of the older relatives exchanged glances, whispering under their breath. Friends shifted, intrigued, some nodding ever so slightly. Matthew's jaw tightened, but I pressed on. "This isn't about a dress. It's about my autonomy. It's about respect. If you cannot see me for who I am, truly, entirely, then that is your problem, not mine." For the first time, I saw Matthew hesitate. He had always relied on subtle control, on me bending quietly under his judgment. But now I was unflinching, visible, and unapologetic. A friend from the group, standing nearby, whispered softly, "Go on, Nora." That small encouragement felt like wind in my sails. I turned slightly, catching her supportive smile, and it strengthened my resolve. I straightened my posture, lifted my chin, and let the words come naturally. "I will not compromise my identity for anyone, not my fiancé, not my family, not society. My choices are mine. I am worthy, not because someone else approves, but because I am authentic, and I will continue to be authentic, no matter the cost." The room seemed to hold its breath. Matthew opened his mouth to respond, but I shook my head gently. "No, I'm not negotiating this. I'm not apologizing for existing as myself. If that means we cannot continue our engagement, then so be it, but I will not undo who I am." He looked at me, eyes narrowing, searching for weakness, but found none. For the first time, I realized that the battle wasn't about the dress, the hair, the image. It was about me taking up space in my own life without fear. I didn't know what the night would bring. Maybe arguments, maybe silence, maybe a confrontation with family. But I felt a deep, undeniable shift inside me. I was no longer shrinking, no longer ceding my identity. I was Nora Evans, 29, independent, capable, and unafraid. Later, as I walked alone to the quiet balcony to gather my thoughts, the city lights spread beneath me like a constellation of possibilities. The cool evening air brushed against my skin, reminding me of the clarity and strength I had claimed. I had weathered judgment, criticism, and doubt, and I had emerged not just unbroken, but empowered. Matthew joined me, hesitating at the doorway. "Nora," he began. I shook my head gently, a small, resolute smile forming. "I am done explaining myself to anyone who cannot accept me as I am. That includes you." He stared, a mixture of disbelief and frustration flickering across his face. I didn't need to convince him. I didn't need to soften, bend, or negotiate. My boundaries were clear, my voice unshakable. That night, I returned inside, walked into the dining room, and held my head high. Some eyes were still curious, some disapproving, but I didn't care. Every step, every breath, every choice reaffirmed my independence. For the first time in a long while, I felt wholly myself. And that, the knowledge that I had taken a stand, that I had reclaimed my identity was more fulfilling than any approval, any compliment, any engagement ever could be. The storm hadn't disappeared, but I had learned to dance in the rain. The mirror in my mind reflected a woman no longer willing to cower, a woman finally in charge of her own life. And that was victory enough.